Hey guys, how's it going? So today I'm going to be showing you how to create a toned paper drawing. Now we're going to be doing it digitally, but this is essentially the same process you would use if you're also wanting to do it traditionally with actual paper and pencils. So what is a toned paper drawing? So a toned paper drawing is a drawing where the background image or the background for your drawing is not white, okay? And now there's a very specific reason we do this, okay? When we are drawing on a white piece of paper, right? What happens is that our pencil has to fill in the entire value range, right? So we have our value range right here that is black all the way to white, right? And then everywhere in between these two values, we have to fill in our drawing, right? So all the different shades of gray in between there, okay? Now when we're working with white, we're going to have to fill in basically every single shade there is besides white, because that's our starting tone, that's our background. So for this bird, for example, we would have to do his beak, right? We'd have to fill that in, all of his feathers, everything over here by his eye, right? All of this stuff we would have to fill all the way in, all of this brown back here. We'd really have to knock back in value and fill all of this in, and then the parts we wouldn't touch would be maybe some parts on his beak, like right here, or like his feathers in here would stay white, okay? Which we can do that's fine. It'll take a while, and it won't have as much dimension, right? It'll just be a plain black and white drawing. Or what we can do is start with a mid-tone for our background. So instead of having a white background, we start with something more in the middle, okay? Now, what this does is it makes it so that instead of drawing every single value between black and white all the way up till white, instead, we have our value range, and we only have to draw black and white on top, okay? And then everything in the middle is going to just be a little bit of black or a little bit of white, but a lot of it is going to just be the background of the paper that we don't have to fill in. So instead of drawing everything in black, we'll be drawing some of it in black and then drawing some of it with white, right? The few little highlights that we're going to add in will be in white, okay? Does that make sense? So that's the purpose of it. So to start, it can help if you're beginning and you have a hard time, you're using a reference photo. It can help to turn it to grayscale, so we'll go ahead and move this to black and white so it's easy to see the values, okay? Now, you want to keep in mind that if you're doing this out of your head or even if you're looking at a photo, what you want to do is look at your photo, okay, and either adjust your background so that it's dark enough or light enough, wherever it needs to be, to match the general overall color of your image, or you'll just have to adjust all the lighting in your image. So you're going to look at this, the black and white photo we have here, and see, okay, anything that's lighter than my background is going to be white, and anything that's darker than my background is going to be black, okay? That makes sense? So if it's the background color or close to it, we're just going to leave it that color. We're going to let that paper show through. But if it's darker than the background, we're going to need to shade it using a darker tone like black. And if it's lighter, we're going to need to lighten it using white, okay? And that's how you're going to determine where the whites go and where the darks go, okay? It takes some practice, it's going to take some time, but I'm going to show you my process for doing it, okay? So I always start out with my line art layer, okay? And I like to, once I have my line art, I like to make a new layer on top of that, and that's going to be kind of all my shading. And I start with black, okay? And I just start working through and working in all of the spots that are black, okay? Now when you're doing this, if you're doing this for Tonevember, remember it's supposed to be a drawing, okay? We're not painting this, we're drawing it, right? It's to improve our drawing skills, to improve our sense of values, right? By having to work with these blacks and whites, okay? But it's drawing, so if you're using a big thick paintbrush to paint values in, you're doing it wrong. You need to be drawing it. So I'm using a pencil brush here, and this is going to be the only brush I use for the entire image, okay? And I just go through and fill in all the parts that are obviously black, right? And you're going to need to be sensitive to values, right? There's some parts that are dark, like for example the top of his head. Obviously we know that it's dark, right? But value-wise, it's not all the way black, right? There's some parts that are getting hit by light that aren't completely black, okay? His eye in here, right? All these places that just need to be pushed back a little darker, and you're making these value comparisons, right? We're comparing different parts, his eyelid compared to the shadow of his face, right? All these different things to make sure we're getting just the right value, okay? So you can go through the entire piece and do that, and I've already done it, so I'll show you here what it looks like. This is what it looks like with just the shadows done, okay? So I'm going to delete that layer beneath. Now you can see there's some parts that look kind of empty, right? Like this part up here on his eye, right? Or maybe on his chest here, right? It just looks a little barren, like there's not a lot of definition. And that's because we still need to go in with our white and add all the values that are going to be lighter. So remember, you don't need to go everywhere with your blacks, right? You're only trying to fill in the areas that are darker than your midtone in the picture, okay? Anything that's lighter, we're going to be using white for, okay? So after I do all of the dark values for the whole image, then I do the light values. Now, when I do the light values, I don't typically pick full bright white because that tends to be a little bit too extreme. Okay, I'd pick a little bit light or a little bit darker and go with a gray more around here, around this area. Okay, and this is because it looks a little more realistic. If you're drawing in real life and you're using colored pencils, it's not going to be this perfectly white, bright white. It's going to be a little bit more subdued, right? So I go with a gray, okay? Just super light gray. It still appears white, right? When we draw it, it still gives the impression of being white, but it's not as intense and in your face, okay? So then I go through and add all the places where there needs to be a little bit of white, okay? Any place that is a little brighter than the background is going to be added with white, okay? Now, you should keep in mind that there's lots of different ranges of white between full-on white and, more subtle, okay? So, for example, you're going to be using cross-hatching and shading to imply different values, okay? So, for example, even though I'm using the same exact color on my brush, that box in the middle implies a little bit less value, right? It's not as bright, okay? And that's what you're going to have to be doing. You have to be looking at this and analyzing it and trying to figure out where the lightest spots are going to go, okay? So you're going to do that over the whole image, right? The brightest spots are going to be the most white, while some other spots aren't going to get as much attention. So, for example, down here on the chest, there's some parts where we can see the form of the feathers kind of rounding off, right? But we don't want to use black to shade in there because it's not actually that dark, right? That'll make it have way too high of contrast. It'll look weird and unrealistic. To shade on something that's white when you're using toned paper, all you have to do is let it fade into the background, right? Let the background of the paper become the shadow, right? So under his neck, for example, instead of filling that all in, that's just going to stay the paper color. And because we have this white down here on his chest, it's going to look like that's the same value, it's just in shadow, right? Okay? And that's how you're going to do that. Okay, so I've already done this step, so go ahead and turn that on to show you. So you can see here what I'm talking about, right? Underneath his neck area, we can tell that it's white like his chest, right? But because it's in shadow, it's not as bright. And so instead of going in with black to fill in that shadow, that would look weird and wouldn't look correct. Instead, we just left it the background of the paper color and added just a tiny little bit of white in some places, okay? And the white a lot of times is really subtle, right? Just a little bit here on his nose, okay? And I didn't go full brightness, right? There's almost none in the back of his head or anything like that, okay? So that's the process for doing that. Now, after you do that, we could turn off this image for a second. You can do different things to kind of help set it from the background, right? One of the cool things about doing it on toned paper is that if you fill in the background with something else, then it'll really make it look like it comes alive, right? One thing that I like to do sometimes is put a white outline around stuff that kind of helps separate it from the background. Another thing you can do, a thick black outline, right? Or if you create a silhouette of your whole object, right? What you can do, so I've already done that. So you would create a silhouette, okay, to make sure, that way I can now draw behind this, right? So if I draw a squiggle, it goes behind my bird layer, right? Because it's on its own separate layer, okay? And then what you can do is create some sort of a background, right? I like to sometimes just fill in the whole background by drawing it in, and I like to leave those pencil marks there so that you could tell it was drawn in instead of just, a fill, right? Instead of just dropping the whole thing. That doesn't look as cool as doing this. So I'll do the entire layer like that, which will give me something like this. You can still see some of those pencil marks in there, okay? And now it really makes it look like it pops off because it's separate from the rest of the background, okay? So that's how you go about doing a tone paper drawing. Once again, make sure that you're drawing, not painting, okay? Also, just keep in mind that it doesn't always have to be gray or brown. You could do a tone paper drawing with blue or red or green or whatever you want. And sometimes you can even use colors to add in, like if you're doing this traditionally, you can add in some orange or whatever, maybe in the eye, some stuff like that, right? That's not against the rules. Just make sure that you're keeping your values consistent. So anyways, that's it for this video. Hope you guys learned something. If you want to participate in Tonevember, be sure to just do a tone paper drawing every day for the month of November. If you can't make every day, do half the days, do one a week, do whatever you can. Post it on Instagram with the hashtag Tonevember and Tonevember 2017. And then if you're lucky, it might get featured on the official Tonevember page. So that's it for this video, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Be sure to subscribe and like. Bye.